Without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce you the first speaker of the evening, Don Ewing, representing Greenlight Pinellas. That's right.
Thank you, Steve.
Good evening, folks. Thank you very much for taking time out of your evenings to come out and learn more about ballot initiatives and about the election process in general and the things that you're going to be asked to vote on in November. It's very important that you educate yourself and are able to make an informed vote when you make the decision to vote in November or September, whenever, if you're an early mail ballot person. So this is an issue that garners quite a bit of attention here during most folks. As was introduced, this is a mass transit initiative that's going to be on the ballot in November. It's not just a light rail system. We'll talk more about that. It's an entire transit system that is being brought to your attention. So I'm here asking you, eventually, by the end of the evening, asking you, when I provide you some information, to vote yes on Greenlight Pinellas. I'm asking you to vote for this referendum versus against it. Barbara is obviously bringing the opposite position, and we'll ask you to vote no. And that's a perfect example for you to be able to make your informed decision this evening. Just some background here, a little bit on the premise really for where the referendum came from. This is many years in the making. I would say decades in the making. Commissioner Karen Seal talks about her father, who was a council member in St. Petersburg, who 40 years ago, almost 37 years ago, was attempting to get a mass transit system into Pinellas County, and various people over the years, including her for the last probably 10 years, have been attempting to get this to a referendum where folks can make an informed decision and a vote on it. So this is not something somebody dreamed up a couple weeks ago or a couple years ago. It really has been talked about for many, many years, many decades. And in recent years, along probably the last 4 years, 5 years, there's been a tremendous amount of studies, which Barb's participated in, called an alternatives analysis. That was a federally funded study. The county has done some studies. The PSTA itself, the bus service, has done some studies. And all of this information, which came really from input from citizens as well as businesses, government officials, elected officials, really anyone in the community, whether they were civic-minded or business-minded or government-minded, were asked to weigh in on this and to participate in these various information gathering events. Over the years, that through a consultant turned into an alternatives analysis plan that was provided to the federal government and the county commission and the state, which is really the basis for the Greenlight Pinellas plan. It rose out of these long studies, several-year studies, that really vetted everything that you could ask about a transportation system. How does mass transit fit best in Pinellas County? What are the best modes of doing that? Should we use rail? Should we use bus? Should we use horse and buggy carriages or little guys with bicycles and carriages on the back? I mean, it really vetted everything. And it also talked about, where the transportation needs are the strongest. And through that process, there was really three areas that were surfaced that really are the three main areas that could use the most mass transit assistance or increments. The downtown Clearwater area is pretty obvious. That's an urban area and a residential area, which includes the beaches. The Gateway area, which is also called Carolina or Feather Sound, that's a huge employment center for the county. It is a growing employment center. There's plenty of real estate to add, more and more businesses there, and through the county economic development offices, that's really where the county is looking to put most new businesses or see the most business growth. Along with businesses comes apartment complexes and condos and residential communities, so that gateway area is really ground zero for where transportation needs are the strongest. The other end of the spectrum, or the third area that needs the transit the most, would be St. Petersburg area, really the downtown walkable community, that whole Beach Drive area. There's a huge amount of infill going there in apartments and condos, and I was down there, I actually spent a few months down there at the end of the year, and there are over 1,000 apartments being built in downtown St. Petersburg. So that really bodes well for a transit system. Folks like that live, work, and play in the same place. So kind of a long-winded way of saying there's been a lot of analysis done that gets us to the point where we are today, which is the information that the Greenlight Pinellas plan has, and it is structured around. The contents of it in that little folder on your chairs there, really, you can look at it later, but excuse me, provides you with the best information, very concise, very to the point, covers all aspects. I'll talk about a lot of that tonight in my presentation. So as groundwork, that's really where the studies came from. This wasn't just a recently thought of thing by just PSDA. There were literally thousands of people involved in helping make this choice here, or build this choice. Thinking about the Tampa Bay region in general, it is the, I think, 25th, 26th largest, Norm, you can probably correct me there, largest metropolitan area in the United States. We are the last metropolitan area that doesn't have a mass transit system in it, which means every other transit system prior, or every other city larger than us, including the most recent one, which we hope to be in front of, which was Detroit. If you're from Detroit, I apologize, but it doesn't have the most stellar of reputation among the top 25 there. Detroit even now is starting down their path to getting a mass transit system. So we're the very last of the largest metropolitan areas, and what that means is that over time, businesses who consider moving their businesses or settling or creating a business, people make choices on moving here, or even tourism for that matter, look at transit as one of the options and factors that's involved in whether they will move or do business in a particular area. So that gives us a slightly disadvantage when people are looking to move here, if mass transit is an important factor in their move. We're roughly the same size as Denver, who put in the mass transit system and its surrounding suburbs, but we have twice the population. They put in a successful mass transit system in the last decade, and it's been pretty successful from what I understand there. And also, Pinellas County is the densest county in Florida to attract new business and maintain economic growth. In order to do that, we need to have transportation options throughout the county, and actually the region for that matter. I think it's important that the Tampa Bay region, not just Oldsmar, not just Palm Harbor, Eastlake, or any of the cities here, we're a county of 24 cities, which makes it very unique to try and govern this county. But we are a region. It also includes the lower part of Pasco County, Hillsborough County, part of Sarasota. And if you really consider that entire area, there's a lot of people here that need to go both ways. If you look at any of the bridges or roads across the bay, every morning and every afternoon, they're full going one way or the other. So we know that there's cross-county transit needs that will be important in the future. But with that just kind of background, I'm going to jump into a couple of slides here, if you don't mind. So I'm going to start with, is today's bus system adequate? Does anybody want, let's just show a show of hands. Who thinks the bus system is adequate today? 4 people, 4 and 5. Okay, so 6, maybe 9 folks. Who thinks that the system is not adequate, that you wouldn't use it because it doesn't have enough, or it doesn't have enough, whatever? Okay, and that's really the truth. Not to pick on PSTA, but in their current model, the bus system is inadequate. I tell the story that I had to go to a meeting at the PSTA building years ago for one of those studies, and I just for fun got on Google Maps and said, okay, how do I get there if I take transit, which there is an app for, by the way. And it was 3 hours, 2 bus changes, and interestingly enough, by the time the meeting ended, which was going to be about 5:30 or 6, it was questionable whether I'd be able to make it back because there was a transfer involved. The second transfer was stopping at 6 o'clock. So yes, the bus system is inadequate, nothing personal against PSDA, but something needs to change. So that's kind of the premise we're working from, and that's the premise for looking at a referendum to give them more money to provide a more adequate and robust transit system. So on November 4th, as I said earlier, you're going to be asked to vote for yes or no on this referendum. We'll have an option to create a better transit system if you vote yes. That's our choice on the table today. The Greenlight Pinellas plan, or no, which says the PSTA is going to have to make do with what it has today, which we already know is inadequate to meet the needs of folks that would like to have transit. So if you look at your choices, it's making an educated decision as to whether this is really a good plan, that you think it would help the economy, that you would help the Pinellas County residents and the folks that work and live and play here. that's what you're making a choice on. It's not whether or not the plan is the best plan. It's not whether the plan is overarching, underarching, does too much of this, too little of that. Unfortunately, in our particular political system, we have choices, and we don't get A, B, C, D, or write-ins. We don't get a write-in on this particular ballot referendum. We get a choice of either expanding mass transit using the Greenlight Pinellas plan, or we make a choice to not do that. If we make a choice to not do that, then PSTA has to make do with the money they have today. It's a state mandated money. They can't just go, okay, we want some more money. It'll take a while, several years for them to be able to get authorized to get more property tax money. So that's what you're going to be asked to vote on in November. I look at this as a generational thing. Rome wasn't built in a day. We didn't build a space system in a week. We didn't build an interstate state system in a year or two. This is a generational opportunity for us as people who live in the county today to be able to say, we're going to vote for mass transit. We're going to make our kids a better place to live. We're going to provide better options for them and their grandchildren and the generations to come. You know, I talk about Eisenhower was a bold man in the 50s to say we need to spend money to pour concrete throughout the United States and provide an interstate road system that will allow the people to be able to move about in their cars. Kennedy also was a bold man in the 60s to say we're going to put a man on the moon. Now, being in Florida, we have a space type of or a space economy here up until just recently. So we were very entrenched in spacewalk or space type of creation. It was a bold move in the 60s. I mean, some of you may go back and remember the 60s. Mine's kind of a blur, so. It was a time where he took a bold step. I think Pinellas County and you individually have to take a bold step this November and say, we need a better transit system. We want to get started today. And eventually, over decades, it will grow into be a great transit system, right? But you got to start somewhere, and you're only given two choices. I mentioned earlier, Greenlight is the first leg in a regional mass transit system. We are voting on a Pinellas County referendum to put a mass transit system in Pinellas County, but it's also the first leg of the system that will eventually spread, hopefully, throughout the state. Mayor Buckhorn, as I pointed out on the slide in his State of the City address, said he supports the mass transit plans. He said everybody should support the Greenlight Pinellas plan, and he expects to put his referendum, or the referendum for Hillsborough and Tampa, on the ballot in 2016, assuming Greenlight passes in the fall. So it is a regional effort, folks. It's not just saying Pinellas County. It's going to take decades to build that. These things are not easy or cheap to build. So it's going to take a long time to get this going, and that's where the generational part comes in. We have to be respectful and mindful of the next generation to be able to lay that in place today for them when they come, as they come forward and as they. So let's talk about the Greenlight Plan vision. I kind of talked about several of the points already, but Greenlight Plan vision is really talking about an enhanced vision of an enhanced mass transit system for our children and grandchildren. It is a mass transit system that includes bus service, it includes light rail, it includes other types of transit and some park and rides and commuter service and connector services, trolley services. It's basically an entire system that feeds to provide a better transit opportunity for most folks in the area. The basis of it is also a fair tax. It's a fair tax because now we're going to spread the burden of paying for the system out across a variety of folks. Today, you pay if you own property in Pinellas County, you pay every dime that goes to PSTA. You're funding that transit system. If we look at saying take that property tax away and we put a sales tax in place, we'll have more folks paying for that. The tourists come in here. The current penny for Pinellas has about a 30%-ish funding by the tourism industry throughout the county here. It will be the same on the next cent that we're asking you to spend on. And it will be a catalyst for economic redevelopment. Whether you call it redevelopment or development, there's going to be building, there's going to be investment, there's going to be buildings put up, whether they're apartment complexes, businesses, blighted areas that will be along the rail system will be able to get redeveloped and possibly be a better place to live, work, and play. So those are the three kind of main areas of it. Yes, a mass transit system, Yes, there are tax, and yes, there's going to be economic development that will come as a result of that. So some of the things that will happen in the bus part of the plan here is you'll get a increased frequent service. As I mentioned, that 2 to 3 hour trek that I would have had to have taken to PSTA will turn into hopefully less than an hour because there's going to be increased frequency for the buses. They'll run every 15 minutes on the high routes versus every hour or half hour today, so they'll be a more viable form of transportation. There'll be extended hours. A lot of the buses go home about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, so in my stranded theory of getting stuck at PSTA, workers that go to work on a late shift can't get home, so the extended hours are part of it. The supporting bus network that will eventually feed the rail system when it's in place to be the spine of the county there, that's really the point, is if the rail system is going to be effective, you have to have a way to get there without having to drive most of the distance to get there. So there'll be parking rides, there'll be express buses that will take you to the train system, if that train system is appropriate for you, or other modes of bus improvements. Enhanced trolley service. Anybody ever been on the trolley, the Jolly Trolley? Few, yeah. If you live more over in Palm Harbor, it runs from Tarpon to Clearwater today, and now goes through Countryside to Safety Harbor, and it has become just a kind of a Friday night, Saturday night. Let's take the Jolly Trolley, because it's kind of cool looking, to Dunedin or somewhere to get to have dinner, and then ride back, so you don't have to worry about driving and drinking or anything like that if you drink. There'll be regional express service. That part of the plan, which is the bus service, will be implemented in the first couple of years so that you can get more quickly to Tampa Airport, you can get more quickly to downtown Tampa, to their transit hub in downtown. You'll be able to connect to Clearwater Beach more rapidly. So there'll be express bus service that will have increased frequency and increased hours as well. So that'll be the precursor to getting us to and from Tampa. More community circulators, as we see up here in North County. The community circulators, the connectors they're called, that run through East Lake and Oldsmar and Safety Harbor. Those will continue to be a service that's viable for North County, because a lot of folks may not take the bus to and from work, or may not rely on rail to get somewhere, but to be able to get that, come to your home if you're near the route, get onto that bus, get into the transit system, and then take a bus somewhere else is really a viable alternative for folks in North County, because typically we have different needs here and we have different desires. The second part of it is the light rail system. In this slide, basically you see that blue line there, which runs from downtown Clearwater to the Gateway Feather Sound area, and then basically from St. Petersburg to the Gateway Feather Sound area. What people think about it, you think about it as being going from Clearwater to St. Petersburg, but it's really not that. It's really, remember I talked about the 3 employment and residential centers as being Clearwater, Gateway, and St. Petersburg, in addition to Largo and Fox Park. Those areas are typically going to go to the center. That major employment area of Feather Sound and Caroline area is really, most people will go to that, right? And then they'll either take a regional connector to Tampa, if that's their choice on a bus today, or they'll work in Tampa, or they'll work in the Gateway area, or they'll branch out to Largo or some of the surrounding areas. So it's really more than that. It's more than, with Gateway being the largest employment center for the future, that's really is getting people to and from that place is really what it's about, more than it is you and I going from Clearwater to St. Petersburg. So transit system doesn't just stop, it doesn't go from A to B, it stops, in our case, in 14 other places along the way. So it's more than just a Clearwater to St. Petersburg. But again, we go back to the choice you have in November. Excuse me. The choice you have in November is to either accept this plan in its beginning or to have nothing. So I hate to keep bringing that up, but that's really what it's about. This was vetted for years, and it may not be the exact route. They may change it as it actually starts going into the construction phase and where they're going to actually put the tracks and stuff, but it may deviate from that. But generally, it's going to go from downtown Clearwater to Largo, out to Feather Sound, quick Gateway area, and then work its way down 275-ish through Pinellas Park down into St. Petersburg. So that's the rail component of it. The third leg of this stool is economic redevelopment. So there'll be economic redevelopment along the rail line. Pretty predictably, virtually every other transit system that's been put in the last 2 decades has had that economic redevelopment that's occurred around those transit centers. And I'll leave it at that. That's basically the third part of this, why it's an important aspect for us. Hopefully we'll bring more businesses, more people to our area, or have folks move to different areas as the system gets put into place. So this map, and it's in the brochure that you have there, is really those pretty colorful lines are nothing more than the enhanced bus services that will be in place in the plan between now, or 2016, and 2024, when the rail system comes online. Most every line in there, except for the dotted black line that goes from Clearwater through Gateway to St. Petersburg, is all different types of bus services, which in your guide, in your handout, on the left side of the page where the map is, will tell you what types of bus systems are there. And that'll give you a good idea of what kinds of things. The red ones are the core routes. They run the fastest. They will be the most frequent, have the longest hours, and they will feed you, and they'll be a better way to get from point A to point D. So that's definitely a point of reference for what the bus system will do, and also where the light rail will be. So this slide just kind of talks about, who does this benefit? There's a wide variety of demographics that this will benefit. It'll obviously benefit workers that can have an option to get to their workplace. It'll benefit homeowners because it may add value to the communities that are going to be redeveloped. It's going to be good for employers because they'll be able to attract people to their businesses if they're in the mass transit system, which if they're in the Gateway area or Clearwater St. Pete, they will definitely get that bonus there of being able to have the transit system. As we've done our work over the past few months, we've had employer after employer in Pinellas County, some of the very largest, including Daycare and a couple others, that said, it is important for us to be able to attract people, including Raymond James, to attract people to work in our businesses to be able to provide mass transit. If we can't provide mass transit, in some people's cases, they ought to not work for it. They won't move to the area if they have to buy a car and drive to work. So not everybody, obviously, but some do. So it's a very important factor for businesses. It's a good important tool for students. The kids that go to St. Pete College or University of South Florida St. Pete College, I think, has 12 campuses around the county, meaning that if you're taking certain courses, you have to go to that campus to take that course. You don't take them all in one, like the central campus in Clearwater or Tarpon Springs. So the kids have to go and migrate between several of the campuses. To be able to provide a bus system for that would be outstanding. They'd be able to get to class. They wouldn't have to spend money in a car. They could take transit. They could do their homework on the bus, whatever the case may be. But it does benefit students. It makes it easier for tourists to get around. Obviously, one of the tenets of the plan and one of the core features of the plan is to provide tourism partners and tourists coming to the area a better way to get to the beaches, typically where they go, or to and from the tourist attractions around the county. Today, there's a system there that I've actually talked to tourism folks about that say they use it, and to the surprise of the residents that they're visiting here, they didn't even know that you could get from Clearwater Beach to the Valley Museum. And these European friends of theirs came here, looked at the bus system because they're used to mass transit, and found a way to get there. So it's really for the tourism partners, those folks that are going to help pay for this transit system over time. And then last but not least, it's for the communities. It will help communities because it will give you options to be able to have transit options for you to be able to move around in, to go to the store, to send your kids to the mall, those ones before the 16-year-old when they get their cars. You can it's a safe matter to get them to Countryside Mall because that's where they hang out anyway, or to the beaches. Those are the kind of things that will help those families in Pinellas County. So if we look at some of the benefits of Greenlight, Greenlight means more access. Part of the more access part we talked about is an increased bus service, shorter wait times, more direct trips, meaning you don't have to take as many transfers over time to get to your destination point, and increased use of the trolley services and the connectors to get you to and from the routes, wherever they may be. Greenlight means more transit options. Transit options mean new connections and services, longer hours, faster commutes for the folks that want to use it. Reduces road congestion. It will, to some degree, reduce road congestion. I don't think it's going to give us an extra lane on Homerton or US 19, but it'll certainly take some folks off the road. And better transit choices when desired. And I think that's the key to a mass transit system. Not everybody's going to use it every day. Not everybody's going to use it often. And not everybody's going to use it for the same thing. But for the folks to have the options to be able to say, gosh, I know it runs every 15 minutes, and perhaps I can actually use it for going to a Rays game or going to a Bucks game or something like that. It's those options that we don't have today. Greenlight is also opportunity. Every dollar invested actually returned in the other cities we talked about, the Denver, Salt Lake Cities, Phoenix and Charlotte and some of those other ones, typically returns 4+ times the investment. So if we look at this investment being $1.5 billion to $2 billion, I forget what the number is, then you're going to see 4 times that probably in economic development that will occur around the transit stations that will be generated because the transit system is in place and available. A lot of that's going to be redevelopment. You're going to have areas that are perhaps not as shiny get redeveloped as the developers see the advantage of having folks on this, available to them on this. And then once completed, I believe the numbers are about 80% of the residents of Pinellas County will live within a quarter mile of the transit system, and 85% will work within a quarter mile of the new and improved transit system. So if you think about that, if you're within a quarter mile typically of the transit system, now it's a viable option, other than days like this and everything for the rest of the summer when it's 90 degrees and humid. You could walk to and from a transit station or get a quick ride to a transit pickup and then get into the transit system. So it was an interesting statistic. I would say that the Greenlight plan is credible and reliable, and it's not just me. It was vetted by Ernst & Young. They did a big study on it. Barbara talks about the study as well. But at least PSTA took the initiative to have it vetted by a national accounting firm and a national transit organization, HTMB. Those organizations looked at the plan, stress tested, even against, they mimicked literally the recession period, 2000 to 2010, I believe. They mimicked that in the model, saying, will this system survive if we have another 2004 through 2008 period that happens again? It was tough, but it was able to fund itself and keep itself going with reduced revenues. Over 60,000 residents provided feedback in those studies I talked about early on. There were that many people that were reached out to that participated in some fashion or another to offer an opinion on whether the transit system that was being talked about and developed at that time in the alternatives analysis provided feedback on the plan, including PSTA's work in the last summer. The agency is a best-in-class agency. It continues to get awards. I'm talking about PSTA here. It continues to get national awards for the work it does and the fiscal responsibility it has. FDOT cleared it of the most recent accusations of improperly using its funding for advocating for the plan. PSTA cannot advocate, they can only educate. The campaign that I participate in can ask you all day long to vote for the plan and tell you why you should vote for it. But PSTA can't do that. And then there'll be an oversight, citizens oversight committee that will be both during the construction and development phase and afterwards, as well as an operational organization. So you could volunteer today if you have a passion about making sure they do the right thing to get considered to be on those committees, to be an oversight committee to make sure they do what they promise that they're going to do. So those are some things that allow them to be a viable consideration there. So the big question is, how are we going to fund this? Obviously, we have an inadequate system today. How do we get enough money to fund this going forward to pay for all these wonderful, cool things? Well, we're going to ask you to vote for an additional penny sales tax, and we're going to take away, we're going to reduce to zero, and I was trying to say that politically correctly, we're going to reduce to zero the property tax that you pay today. There's an example on the board that an average homeowner in Pinellas County, or an average home in Pinellas County worth about $160,000 on the tax roll, you can make it 140, 170, all in that same range, using the IRS calculators for how much you would spend in sales tax for an average family of four making medium income in Pinellas County. You'll save somewhere between $60 and $100 in the new plan with sales tax versus the property tax you pay today. Obviously, that's an estimate. It's using IRS numbers for the sales tax. It's using straight numbers for the median houses and the 0.7305 mills that you pay today. So basically, you're paying, if you're in a $160,000 or $100,000 house, you're paying $73 a year in PSTA property taxes. Am I right on that, Bob? Yeah, 73 on 100, $73 on 100. I always get confused. What's a millage? Anybody know what a millage is? All we know is that that adds up to whatever our tax bill is every year. But you pay about, let's call it $80 to $100 or more a year in PSTA property tax today. IRS says that if we say take that away and give you and you pay sales tax, on the average, you should save money if you're in that range of a mid $100,000 house and an average income. Obviously, if you go out and buy new furniture or other things, you're going to spend more in sales tax. But let's even talk about that. That's an interesting point. Sales tax is not levied on certain things. You know that today because you have a 7% sales tax that you're paying. You know there's certain things that are non-taxable on your bill. A lot of times it's food and medicine. But also there's a cap on the sales tax, the incremental sales tax, the 7 and proposed 8%. If you buy anything over $5,000, you max pay $50 more. So you go buy a car for $30,000 with the new sales tax, you'll pay $50 more. Okay? You buy a $5,000 car, you'll pay $50 more. So it's not a huge amount of money that you're having to pay. It's not a lot of out of pocket, but it is an additional penny of sales tax. We talked about the tourism industry pays a third of that. I already talked about that. We'll skip past that. So I'm saying that the Greenlight Pinellas plan is the right plan at the right time. We need it today. We can't wait another 40 years. It's for the right reasons. It really is to increase mass transit options for everybody in Pinellas County, including our $1 billion a year tourism people that come to the area. It's for a wide cross spectrum of age groups and demographics within the makeup of our communities. Millennials, those 18 to 34-year-olds, they're not really car freaks like I was when I was growing up. I couldn't wait till I was 16 and get a car. But believe it or not, kids today may not want to do that if they live in a more urban area. They'd rather just be able to take transit systems and not have to own a car, or not have to buy a second car, perhaps. Seniors, same way. They can now live at home longer. They have better transit options, not have to go to an ALF facility and be in an institutionalized environment. They may be able to stay with their kids and still have transit options to get to and from doctors and shopping, etc. Veterans, it's a big area where our Bill Young Veterans Hospital down in Largo, I guess, has a huge veteran population here. And it's a very important thing for veterans to be able to have transit options to get to and from there, wherever they're going. And then children for generations to come. This is a generational thing, folks. This is not a today thing. All right, so here, finishing up, here's the actual referendum to be asked to vote on in November. This will be on your ballot, probably the very last thing on page 99, but it'll be the last point on there. And it's basically saying, we want you to, basically the thing is to levy a countywide 1% sales surtax to fund the Greenlight Pinellas plan for transit, for public transit. And then the details are in there. The 75 words or whatever they're allowed to put in there with the lawyers. But that's the exact ballot language you'll see in November 4th. So just give a little read there so there's not any confusion later on. If you vote yes, then you're saying you vote for the plan. If you vote no, you're saying you're voting against the plan. Very simple, not like the last ballot we had with 11 legislator sponsored bills that didn't make any sense. If you voted yes, it really meant no, and if you voted no, it meant maybe. It was very confusing for even people that were paying attention. But this is straightforward. You vote yes for it, you vote no to be against it. So we're in good company. We have a lot of businesses, chambers of commerce, both large and small businesses that are, these are just a partial list. You can go on our website and see the actual list. Everyone from Pinellas County down to all the large cities and most of the chambers and businesses in the area that publicly are supporting this. There are individuals, some listed on here, and chambers of commerce that are supporting this as well. Hopefully the North Pinellas Chamber of Commerce will take a position on it one day. So there are folks from a variety of walks of life that actually think this is a good idea. And I will close by saying that we hope that you will educate yourself. The PSTA's website of greenlightpinellas.com is an excellent place to get information. That's them providing you with the factual information. And then for us to vote Vote Yes on Greenlight.com is the campaign website, where you can get additional information. You can choose to volunteer if you'd like and help us out in our campaign. You can even put a little button there to give us $10 or $20 if you think it's a good idea, to just help us move forward in this campaign. Obviously, campaigns take money. Nothing is free, including the roads. Those roads you drove on tonight, you paid for somewhere in a tax somewhere. So we ask for your vote in yes in November, and we thank you very much for attending tonight and paying attention. Thank you.
Barbara Hazelton, and please join me in a warm welcome for Ms.
I'm probably, did you get that, Seth? Thank you very much. I'm probably going to grab this in a moment and get down here because I like to dig into the presentation with you. A lot of the information that I will bring to you tonight is a result of attending the PSTA meetings for the last 3.5 years. Not only the board of director meetings, but the various and numerous committee meetings. Because there's 15 members of the PSTA board, and there are like 6 committees, and those members populate those committees, sometimes 2 and 3 committees each. And so that is a very busy schedule, and through that process, they've moved this initiative forward over the last 3.5 years, because each member has maybe 3 and 4 votes. So I just wanted to start out by saying just a few of the things that Don said, and thank you, Don, for being here tonight. And that is that I was, along with several other people, at the first meeting of the Transportation Task Force in December of 2010, when Karen Seal and 25 hand-picked folks were on the Transportation Task Force. And on that very day, there was an artist was there, and as the meeting went on for several hours that morning, the artist was listening, and he was very talented, by the way. He had a whiteboard with colored dry markers, and he was doing a mural all throughout the morning. And at the end of the mural on this first meeting was a train. So this is not something that was evolved. This was a starting point. And $5 million have been spent for the alternative analysis and monies that have been spent out of the PSTA operations budget to get us to this point. So I just want you to know that this is the process that we have seen. And I, like you, how many people here are actually small business owners? Super. Like you, I believe in the free markets. And that's one of the reasons that I am so committed to this process and going all the way through November, because I believe that free markets should drive our growth in our county, and that free markets should drive where people live, and free markets should drive how people get there, and not the government. So that is really my dedication in a nutshell. Now, I'm going to take this. Oh, good. I love it. I'm not very technical, okay? So I have people who help me with technical things. And if I stand here, am I going to be in front of people? Am I okay? All right. So basically, in America, in 1956, we chose automobiles. And the Eisenhower Interstate Highway Act, the public transportation at the end of World War II, nearly 50% of Americans relied on public transportation after the war was over, and they returned home from the war, and they married, and they started having all of us baby boomers, and nearly 50% of people relied on public transportation. But with the automobile and the 48,000 miles of interstate highway system that we have achieved, unlike the rest of the world, and this accomplishment that we have achieved, we have personal transportation that we have chosen, and that's what made America so prosperous. It's a very big portion of why we are so prosperous. And currently, nationwide, less than 2% of Americans rely on public transportation. In 2010, the U.S. Census in Pinellas County, 1.6% of the residents of Pinellas County responded that they relied on public transportation to get to work. This is our public bus system, PSTA, and we have something here that we can be very excited about because the potential is there to deliver a fine public bus service to the folks that they're currently not getting in the way of service. Now, I think it's important because some of the things that I've learned I want to share with you that I never knew about, such as there's 200 buses in the PSTA system, there's 5,500 stops around the county, there's 40 routes in the service. I never knew these things, and I want to share these things because I think it's fundamental information for you to be able to make an informed decision on facts and figures. Currently, PSTA operation budget, not the capital budget, I'll talk about that in a moment, the operation budget is 75% subsidized by taxpayers through our dollars, either through income tax or through local ad valorem tax. But state grants, it's all through tax dollars because guess what? The government doesn't have a dime unless what? We give it to them. And so anything that comes back to a government agency is through tax dollars. And the federal and state grants at PSTA represent 22% of their operation budget. Passenger fares represents 22% of their operation budget. So that's important for you to understand that the passenger pays 22% of the operations when they board. Advertising is 3%, and this is the crux of the matter, is the ad valorem property tax. It represents currently 53% of the operation budget of PSTA, and their 2014 operation budget is $63 million, and that's 5% up over last year. Now, when you add the capital budget of another $23 million, PSTA currently has $87 million budget in 2014. If you divide that by the number of annual rides, now this is not riders, this is not people, this is rides. So if I wanted to go, for instance, from here to, I'll just make up the Cairo Mall, it may take me getting on a bus, transferring 2 times to get there, and then the 3 on the way back. So I represent 6 rides. I talked to someone today who told me that he goes to work 5 days a week, and he takes 2 transfers, so he's 2 there, 2 back, so he's 4 rides a day. He represents 20 rides a week. So it's important that we understand this concept of how PSTA and other bus companies count rides. The cost per ride, when you divide the $87 million between the number of annual rides, is $7 per ride. Then the average fare by rider per ride is 91 cents after discounts. The fare, we all have people say, well, it's $2. Well, when you factor in the discounts and the subsidies, it comes out to 91 cents per ride. So we already subsidize $6 per ride, and the current system is 87% subsidized. Now, I only use this slide because it is a perfect representation of what happened to our property values from 2000 to 2012. And you can see the red line here is just, don't get in the weeds on this. This is just what happened to our property. So here in 2002, this is where our properties, the baseline started out, our real estate, our homes. And then as the decade started chugging along and all of the monkey business, if you will, that was going on, that was driving this false economy that we were all living through, by 2007, real estate all over America, and certainly here in Florida, peaked right here at 2007. And I don't know about you, but I thought I was rich. How about you? I mean, I thought that I thought first of all, I was just going to keep going and going and going and going, and I was going to get a reverse mortgage, and I was just going to live comfortably off of my house the rest of my life. I mean, I had this all planned. There was no one that was more devastated than I was when it started to fall apart and the bubble burst. Well, PSTA's ad valorem property tax, you see, was going up at the same rate of ascension. And then when the bubble burst, then it started to burst also. But like many people that were getting seconds on their home and so on and so forth, PSTA made some decisions through this period of time that was a lot of spending. And so what we have is that in 2007, their millage rate was 0.56. As the property values started to go down and their income off of the ad valorem started to go down, here they passed a 30% tax increase in 2012 on our homes, right here. And they raised the millage from 0.56 to 0.73. But during that time, they built their brand new facility. And I believe it's located on like 90 acres. If you haven't seen it, it's really worth the drive. It's quite a facility. It's on 34th Street off of Roosevelt. And they expanded their space. They doubled space and expenses. Before this, they were over on 49th Street, over by the jail. And they expanded the bus lines all through that period of time. This is another way. This is a PSTA slide. These are PSTA slides. This is another way to look at the ad valorem property tax. And that is that in 2007, at the high water mark, they were at $38 million on that portion of their operation budget, if you recall. And then as the bottom dropped out, the ad valorem started to drop down, got down to $26 million. Here in 2012, they passed the 30% increase on the property tax, and it boosted it back up to $33 million. So they raised the taxes on our homes in 2012, but they continue to outspend their income. This is a PSTA chart. As you can see, it's a pretty recent one, really, just a few months ago. And this is 2002, and it shows PSTA spending, a straight trajectory up to 2007 at the high water mark, and then the bottom dropped out. They stalled, they laid people off, they cut back on expenses. Here is in 2012, is where they had the 30% tax increase on our homes, and the spending started again immediately. Here in 2014, I did not alter this slide. This yellow line is their line on this slide. This is November of 2014, the referendum, and this is when they hope that you're going to pass the 1% sales tax and bail it out. Because during that period of time, another indicator is the salary and fringe benefits of PSTA. During 2004, they had 535 employees. As their income went up and they continued that growth, they added people. To 2007, they had a high of 617 people. Then the bottom dropped out. They let people go. Here's the tax increase. And the hiring started again, and they're constantly hiring more and more people. Now, you may say, well, that's okay. Well, you know what? That's good. They're creating jobs. Well, PSTA's salary and fringe benefits are 60% of their operation budget. I have business people here today. You know you cannot operate with a 60% personnel budget. In fact, the private bus industry, the standard is less than 40% for salary and fringe benefits. More extravagant spending. You know, this is, to me, is always what I think of with PSTA, all the buses that we see going around town over all the years that I've lived here, 30. And this is a $450,000 diesel buses. But these diesel buses are being replaced one by one by $650,000 hybrid buses over the last 3 years. So now we're buying 2 buses when we used to buy 3. And these are unproven buses. I recently requested a 2-week comparison of a diesel bus and a hybrid bus on the same route over a 2-week period of time. I requested the fuel consumption of that on a public records request 2 weeks ago, and I was denied. But PSTA CEO Brad Miller warns, again, that if a new sustainable funding source is not found, PSTA services will have to be cut 28% by 2016. And certainly we've heard Don today tell us that if we don't pass this, it's bad news, right? It's curtains for public transit in Pinellas County. But certainly PSTA is at a crossroad because the .73 is basically the ceiling that by state law that they can charge on our ad valorem. .75 is the statute. So they were at .56, then they went to .7305 in 2012, and their spending has continued. If you remember, they are painted in a corner as far as where they can go. They cannot raise our taxes anymore. So they have to transform a great public expense or fix the bus system. That brings about the Greenlight Pinellas plan. Now, first of all, is it a train? Is it a bus? You know, there's a lot of confusion about what the Greenlight Pinellas plan is, and I think Don was trying to explain that. But certainly PSTA's message to the public more than anything is that Greenlight means more bus service. Well, that's interesting because the Ernst & Young report that Don referred to, this is a page out of the Ernst & Young report. This is the capital page about where the money is going to go for the capital over the period of years. This goes back to 2050 here. And what this is showing us is that it's a $2.5 billion project, and 90% of it is for rail. The black is the build out of the rail system, and the rail is supposed to be completed by 2024 here. This is the expansion of the buses, which is $300 million. So what we're talking about is 90% electric rail and 10% bus. Now, I'm going to mention to you too, the Ernst & Young report, there was another report that was ordered and never really was shared, and it was called the Prague report. And the Prague report was supposed to be a check on the Ernst & Young report. So we hired another checker on the checker, and which government often does, don't they? But if they don't like the results, they don't talk too much about it. And one of the things that what you'll see here is that, for instance, this little bleep here, this is what's called the midlife tweak, if you will, on the rail cars. So they have that factored in as a capital expense 13 years after the end of the installation of the rail. What they have failed to factor in that the Prague report caught is the replacement of all of the 33 rail that have a 25-year life. So all of the 33 cars that are supposed to be $4 million a piece in the initial build-out, of course this represents land acquisition, rail costs, actual rail costs and so on and so forth. But there should be another huge bleep down here showing the replacement of all of the cars. First of all, a lot of people think that this is high-speed rail. They're just not sure. And this is Euro-style rail with an average 155 miles per hour. And this is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, what is proposed for Pinellas, is basically a trolley car. If you go to Wikipedia and put in light rail, the words trolley car also show up. And it's a century-old technology that governments are trying to make a comeback with. And it's proposed for Pinellas. And, even though the average speed, it could be maybe 50 or 60 miles per hour as far as ability, the fact of the matter is that if you're starting downtown St. Pete and you're going to Clearwater and you've got 16 stops, this is the same that is true of other communities, and the average speed comes in about 25 miles per hour. And of course, it's stopping and going, stopping and going. Greenlight Pinellas is a tax swap. Greenlight Pinellas is a $100 million annual tax increase, all going to PSTA. So while my opponents would like us to be figuring whether we're going to be $20 ahead or $20 behind on our tax swap, the truth of the matter is that it's a $100 million tax increase in revenue to PSTA. It will raise our county sales tax from 7 to 8%, making our sales tax the highest in the state of Florida if we pass this. And the ad valorem property tax now that we talked about is $32 million a year. Remember that? The 1% sales tax increase, the first full year that they will collect it, which is in 2017, according to the Ernst & Young report, is $148 million. So PSTA tax revenue will be plus $100 million a year. Now I want to tell you, I'll take a swap like that any day. I would love that kind of a swap in my life, because the increase is enormous. Here's the old tax of the ad valorem of roughly $30 million. What we have here is 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, because it doesn't have a sunset, folks. Once we pass this, it is permanent. And in fact, in the interlocal agreement, it states in there that as long as we owe a dime on this system, that the sales tax cannot be repealed. So here we have what would be the impact of the penny, this little penny that we're talking about. Pennies add up. And what we have in 2017, the first full year of collection, is $148 million per year going to PSTA to replace our ad valorem. And then that would be in addition to the other grants and monies that I pointed out to you, advertising and so forth. And then Ernst & Young applied a 3% growth in sales tax each year. And you can see how this escalates. But that is really just the beginning. Because let's just say, for instance, that I went and got a job and I got paid $85,000 a year. My new job's paying me $85,000. I just located here and I need to go buy myself a house. And I find a house for $350,000. Then I'm going to go to the bank and present what my bills are and my income and see if I qualify for that $350,000 home. Without getting into all the details as far as what your down payment is, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that I'm going to use my $85,000 to leverage myself into this $350,000 home, right? Well, keep that thought in mind because the sales tax we're talking about is the income stream that they will use then to go and get us into the debt, which initially will be $1 billion in debt in order to start this program. Okay, so they're going to use the income stream from the sales tax as proof of ability for Pinellas County, which is us, because if you vote for this, you're going to be co-signing on this note, to apply to federal and state government for loans and grants and the bond market for the billions that it's going to take to build what I like to call PSTA World. Because the referendum has no contingency upon approvals. What does that mean? What if they don't get the state and federal grants after we pass this? There's nothing in there that says that the deal's off. So they won't even know until after this passes whether they're going to get the grants that they need to make this go forward. And these are huge numbers and not to be considered a given. Are there compelling reasons that we as Pinellas County residents should consider this? Is there a demand for more public transportation by our citizens? Is there a need for more public transportation? First of all, the thing is built on false premises. Now, I carried this up here on purpose. This is their 20-page, we, by the way, cannot afford to have these kind of 20-page glossy brochures. We print brochures on a printer, okay? It's working for us. But this is a 20-page brochure. On the front page of this brochure is that page right there. You're welcome to look at this brochure. Because their leading premise is that more than 200,000 additional people and 148,000 new jobs are expected in Pinellas County by 2040. But that's not true.
That's not true.
That's not true.
True.
In other words, they want us to think that all of these, by the way, 200,000 people is 20% more people of the million that we currently have, a little less than a million. The fact is that from 20 to 2010, we lost population in Pinellas County. And that was evidenced by the fact that we lost a Florida House seat, remember? Okay, so the truth is that Pinellas County, this was in the St. Pete Times, Tampa Bay Times, February 16th, the total county population, 1970 through 2040. They published this in the business section, and it shows the 1 million mark here. Pinellas County is projected to remain stabilized at right under 1 million through 2040. And we can see here that Hillsborough, because of the fact that they have so much land available, that they're expected to grow. Another false premise, record ridership on the buses. Now, there's no question that therefore, especially, I think the bus ridership right now is down. Isn't that true, Bob? Isn't the bus rider numbers down a little bit?
Like about 0.2%.
Okay, so they're not up. And the fact is, too, is that in the Ernst & Young report, they started by saying that we should be right now at 15.7 million rides on the PSTA system, because the Ernst & Young report, part of this is projecting ridership. There were already over 1 million rides short this year on the projection for the financials to work on Greenlight Pinellas. But how do they count riders? I already explained that to you. And as I said, in fact, currently the ridership, in other words, the trending is not up, the trending is flat on the ridership. Have you noticed empty buses?
Yes.
Well, you're wrong. You can't trust what you see. You have to trust what you hear. I know I see empty buses, but I'm told that there's standing room only on most of the routes. Now, there's no doubt that they have busy routes, but I was delighted last year that we spent another $700,000 out of our tax dollars for an independent bus study, because I had seen the empty buses, and since I'd gotten so keen on all of this, it was like I dreamed empty buses. I mean, it was like every place I went, I saw empty buses. I live off of 4th Street and 9th Street area down in St. Pete, and there's so many buses running through there, and there's 2 and 3 and 4 people on these $600,000 buses. And so when they decided to do the bus study, which was something they had to do, which by the way they had not done in 20 years as I understand. So what business doesn't evaluate itself over a 20-year period of time? So I was delighted to see they were going to have to do that. And this was the slide that I grabbed onto that was a result of the independent bus study. It was a company out of California that we paid $700,000 to evaluate the routes. And here's what they found. The gray are buses, the blue are the trolleys, and the 2 green ones here are the routes that go across, one of them across the Howard Franklin, the other across the Gandy. Okay? Again, untouched. This is not, I have not touched this slide, PSTA slide, and it shows us that the top 5 local routes account for nearly half of the system ridership. So there's 40 routes here. The trolleys, these 2 here account for another 13%. So combined, these 7 routes account for 60% of the system ridership. These are why we see a lot of underutilized buses. In fact, 30% of PSTA's ridership, the system routes, are carrying less than 15 people per hour. That's fact, and that's what was in this presentation. So why don't we use more of these? Also, there's a broad-held belief that there is somehow or another, someday, some way, going to be a rail bridge to Tampa, but it's not true. And by the way, the farthest north that the rail is going to come for you folks is East Bay. Now it's going to come right here to East Bay and cut across, and then the link will go downtown Clearwater. Okay? So here you see these circles here. These are all of the transit stops, all the way down through. And here is this map. I have to tell you, I have asked more than once if they would cease to use this map, because I think that it's so easy for people to misunderstand this map, because this looks like a rail link to Tampa. And certainly we have even heard about things like going to TIA. You know, people want to believe, you know, they just want to. We just want to believe what we want to believe. But we're supposed to understand that if you look at the legend here, that this means maybe someday there will be a rail link to Tampa. The only thing that's in the Greenlight Pinellas plan is more buses to Tampa. But you can see by going back here how much we need that. But they think if we have more buses, more people will ride. Maybe they're right. But there is no link to Tampa or TIA. And this was such a hotly contested, controversial subject. The Tampa Bay Business Journal, Eric Snyder, wrote a story a little over a month ago, and the name of the story was, "The new Howard Franklin span won't be as rail ready as some would like." There's this perception out there that the new northbound span of the Howard Franklin will be rail ready. It's not true. That article is in your handout today. By the way, you all have a handout that contains a lot of the presentation and also some of these articles. Dedicated bus lanes, bus rapid transit. There are plans in the Greenlight plan to have what they call dedicated, what they call bus rapid transit or express buses. Not that it's not a bad idea. Maybe we could rework the route and work some of this into it to give folks a better service with less stops. But what grabbed my attention when I saw this on their site months ago was with this right here. This is 4th Street. This is a photoshopped 4th Street with, this is their slide, and it says major arteries of the transit network, create BRT and rapid corridors on the core network. And then what does this say here, anybody?
Bus only.
Bus only. You know what? 4th Street can't afford to lose 2 lanes of traffic. What other streets are we talking about? Central Avenue, BRT, 49th Street, East Bay, Rapid, Gulf Bay Boulevard, Rapid. Now here this tells us what years they're going to do the environment and engineering and the capital procurement, and then the service will open. Here's phase 2, 4th Street, Almerton Road, US 19, and Seminole Boulevard. Again, there was a lot of dispute about whether or not there was dedicated bus lanes or not dedicated bus lanes. I simply saw the picture. You know, the picture looked pretty clear to me that there was some plan somewhere for bus lanes only. And so this was PolitiFact did an article and said Greenlight Pinellas supporters say the plan won't take existing lanes from other vehicles, and they rate the claim mostly false. The county will be promoting customers, and I say this, you know, I put this slide in here this afternoon for you folks that are North County business owners, Chamber of Commerce members, because I want you to only imagine the county will be promoting customers to go to those 16 Greenlight hubs in the south part of Pinellas County. There's going to be such a campaign if this thing were to pass. Can you imagine what a campaign there would be to drive people to the hubs of the rail system? If your business is not on the line, you will be competing with it and paying more tax to do so. 41 intersections. This is the result of a public records request. There are 41 intersections that will be waiting on trains in Greenlight Pinellas plan, and those 41 intersections are in your packet. The trains, by federal law, have the right of way, and they'll be going through 41 intersections every few minutes. So I'm kind of coming towards the end here. The light rail subsidy. This is from the National Transit Database, the Federal Transit Administration. The PSTA bus system, as you recall, I started out the presentation laying out that it was a $7 per ride cost, a $6 subsidy. In Charlotte, they have a 9-mile rail that they opened 7 years ago. And the subsidy is $15.45 per ride, and the cost of the ticket is $2. The taxpayer's paying the difference. If a family of 4 wants to go down to the convention center, it's going to cost them, the taxpayers in Charlotte, $60 down, $60 back, or $120 to take those folks down there, and they will pay $16, the riders. Houston, a 7-mile track, the subsidy is $16.28. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a 12-mile track, the subsidy is $21.34. In Phoenix, 20-mile track, the subsidy is $32.73. Greenlight Pinellas is a 24-mile plan, but I'm sure it'll be different here. In fact, in the Charlotte Observer, they're having all kinds of financial problems in Charlotte over this because their rail, as I said, opened 7 years ago. They had a very aggressive plan, and this is a headline out of the Charlotte Observer. There's many stories you can go on and check online. Cash-strapped city, state officials seek private dollars for public projects. Mecklenburg County leaders struggle to find a way to pay for $5 billion worth of unmet transportation projects in the Greenlight plan. It's the same thing. They call theirs CATS. Because when you're talking about a mega project like this that takes 10 years to build it out, it's impossible to manage. The cost overruns, the average is 36%. Ernst & Young did stress tests on the cost overruns of 10 and 15%, ladies and gentlemen. You need to know that. When in fact, 18 different rail projects were analyzed by a man by the name of Ben Flyberg, and 36% is the average cost overrun in the United States. This is what the future looks like. If it's going to take 10 years to build this thing out, can you imagine? Blockbuster had a great run, didn't they? And now they're a box at Publix. Because things change, don't they? I mean, that's just, the years go by. How many Fridays did we all get in our cars and go down to Blockbuster and spend the evening looking at movies? I mean, it was a way of life for a few years, but that's all over now. And when it comes to personal transportation, this is what the future likes. And really, the truth is, for these kind of numbers, we could darn near buy every bus ride on one of those. As a recap, there is no expectation of increase in population in Pinellas County. There's no rail bridge to Tampa that exists in the Pinellas Greenlight plan. Congestion would get worse and more frustrating with 41 crossings with surface trains every few minutes, cars losing lanes potentially to buses and trains. Less than 2% of Pinellas residents rely on PSTA. The tax swap is a massive $100 million tax increase. PSTA local tax revenue would leap 300% from $32 million to $443 million per year without sunset, and the subsidy could go from $7 to $15 or more for ride, and the North County residents would be donors. I hope you agree with me that it looks like there really is no need for this in Pinellas County, although a few people may want it. We would like to see them fix the bus system for those that depend on public transportation and not start taxing them. So thank you very much.